Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the Varaxian merchant vessel Starweaver, watching Earth's orbital stations grow smaller against the backdrop of her home planet. 25 years of service in Earth's Space Force had taught her to maintain perfect posture even when no one was watching, but now she allowed her shoulders to slump slightly. The familiar weight of her uniform was gone, replaced by the flowing garments favored by her new alien employers. "Chief Chen, your presence is requested on the bridge." The ship's internal communication system spoke in perfect English, though Sarah could hear the underlying harmonic tones that marked it as Varaxian technology. "Acknowledge," she replied, straightening her spine once more. The title still felt strange. Not commander anymore, but chief of security on a civilian vessel. The change had been her choice, though some days she wondered if she'd made the right one. The corridors of the Starweaver were a study in organic architecture, all flowing curves and bioluminescent lighting that pulsed gently in time with the ship's systems. Sarah's boots, the only piece of her old uniform she'd kept, made soft sounds against the living metal floor as she made her way to the bridge. The ship's atmosphere was kept slightly cooler and more humid than Earth standard to accommodate the Varaxians' preferences, but she'd grown used to it over the past few weeks. Captain Zexley waited for her, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light from the helm displays. Like all Varaxians, he stood nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and iridescent scales that shifted color with his mood. Currently, they showed a calm blue-green that Sarah had learned to associate with routine business. "Chief Chen," he greeted her, his translator rendering his clicking speech into smooth English. "We've received our final clearance from Earth Control. Before we make the jump to deep space, I wanted to ensure you had no last-minute concerns about our security protocols." Sarah appreciated the gesture, even though she'd already reviewed everything 3 times. "The protocols are solid, Captain. The new shield harmonics are properly calibrated, and the crew has completed all required drills." She paused, then added, "Though I'd like to run one more simulation of the emergency procedures for the cargo hold." Zexley's scales rippled with approval. "Thorough as always, Chief. I see why Ambassador Reyes recommended you so highly." His head tilted in the Varaxian equivalent of a smile. "Though I suspect she also hoped your presence might help ease tensions after the Proxima incident." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of Proxima. She'd been there 3 years ago, when a misunderstanding between human colonists and Varaxian traders had nearly sparked an interstellar incident. She'd helped prevent it from escalating into violence, but the memory still haunted her. "The Proxima incident happened because of cultural misunderstandings on both sides," she said carefully, "which is exactly why mixed crews like this one are so important." "Indeed." Zexley's scales shifted to a warm amber. "Though I imagine some of your former colleagues in the Space Force had strong opinions about your decision to join us." Sarah thought of the messages from her old squad mates, ranging from concern to outright accusations of betrayal. "They'll understand eventually. The galaxy's too big for us to stay divided by species." A soft chime interrupted them as First Officer Nazd Tool entered the bridge. The younger Varaxian scales were flickering with excited patterns, never a good sign during routine operations. "Captain, Chief," she said, her translator barely keeping up with her rapid speech. "Long-range sensors have detected something unusual in the Kuiper Belt. It appears to be a distress signal, but the frequency—" She hesitated. "What about the frequency?" Sarah asked, already feeling her combat instinct stirring. "It's using an Earth military protocol, Chief, one that hasn't been in use for over 50 years. Sarah moved to the sensor display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Kuiper Belt was vast, full of ice and rock, and ancient debris from humanity's early ventures into space. Most of those old wrecks had been salvaged or cataloged years ago. "Show me the signal pattern," she requested, and Naztol brought up the waveform on the main display. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized it. "That's a black box beacon. We used them on colony ships during the first expansion." She looked at Captain Zexley. "Sir, if there's any chance there are survivors." The captain's scales shifted to a deep purple of concern. The trade route to Centauri can wait. Naztol, plot an intercept course. Chief Chen, I want a full security assessment. If this is genuine, we may be dealing with humans who have never encountered alien life. As the bridge crew sprang into action, Sarah felt a familiar tension in her shoulders, the weight of command and responsibility she thought she'd left behind. But this time it was different. She wasn't just a human commander anymore, or even just a security chief. She was a bridge between two worlds, and something in the vast darkness of space was calling for help. The Starweaver altered course, its living hull humming with power as it turned toward the signal. Sarah watched the stars shift in the viewport and realized that despite everything, despite the changes and uncertainties, she felt more at home than she had in years. Whatever they found out there in the belt, she would face it as both a daughter of Earth and a member of this alien crew. She just hoped they were ready for what awaited them in the darkness between the worlds. The Starweaver's searchlights cut through the darkness of the Kuiper Belt, illuminating chunks of ice and rock that drifted past like ancient sentinels. Sarah stood in the ship's observation deck, running her hand over the familiar grip of her magnetic grappling gun. Some habits died hard. She kept her standard boarding kit, maintained even after retirement, though she never expected to use it again. The beacon signal is stronger now, Naztol reported from her station. We should have visual contact within the next few minutes. Sarah nodded, studying the sensor readouts. The temperature in the observation deck felt colder than usual, though she knew it was just her imagination. What do we know about ships from that era? The first expansion vessels were massive, she explained to the gathered Varaxian crew. Colony ships designed to carry up to 10,000 people in cryosleep. They were built before we had reliable FTL drives, so the journeys were expected to take decades. Captain Zexley's scales shifted to a contemplative gray. And this one never reached its destination. No, Sarah confirmed. According to the signal pattern, this is the Pioneer's dream. She launched in 2157, bound for the Tau Ceti system. Lost contact 6 months into the journey. There were 8,000 colonists aboard. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 8,000 lives, lost in the void. 8,000 dreams that never reached the stars they'd aimed for. Contact, the sensor officer announced. Visual range achieved. The searchlights swept across something massive in the darkness. A hull of titanium and carbon composite, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. The Pioneer's dream was a relic of humanity's first stumbling steps into deep space, when ships were built like ocean-going vessels of old. Its hull was scared but largely intact, rotating slowly in the endless night. Life support systems, Sarah asked, her training taking over. Minimal power signatures, Naztol reported. But the hull hasn't been breached. If the cryopods were properly maintained, we need to board her, Sarah said, turning to Captain Zexley. Sir, those pods might still be functioning. There could be survivors. The captain's scales rippled with concern. After 50 years, and even if there are, they've never seen beings like us. The shock alone could be dangerous. Then let me go first, Sarah offered. I can assess the situation, prepare them if necessary. But we can't just leave them out here. Zexley considered for a moment, his forearms moving in the complex gestures that marked deep thought among his people. Finally, he nodded. Assemble a boarding team. But Chief Chen, remember, you're not in the Space Force anymore. This is a rescue mission, not a military operation. Sarah managed a small smile. Understood, sir. Though I'd feel better with Naztol on the team. Her engineering expertise could be crucial. The first officer's scales flushed with surprised pleasure at being requested. I would be honored, Chief. The next hour was a flurry of preparation. Sarah selected 2 more crew members, Corell, a medical specialist, and Vextor, an experienced Zero worker. As they suited up in the airlock, she couldn't help but notice how smoothly they worked together. human and Varaxian movements complementing each other with practiced ease. Approaching docking range, the helm announced. Matching rotation. Sarah checked her team's safety lines one last time. The Starweaver's living hull extended a tendril of biomechanical matter, forming a seal around the Pioneer's Dream's emergency airlock. It was a perfect merger of human and Varaxian technology, something that would have seemed impossible during the era when this ship was launched. Remember, Sarah briefed her team, we're likely to find automated systems still running. Don't touch anything until we've assessed its status. Corell, focus on the life support readings. Vextor, watch our structural integrity. Nastol, you're with me on systems analysis. The airlock cycled, and they pushed off into the derelict ship. Their helmet lights illuminated corridors that hadn't seen human presence in half a century. The air was stale but breathable, a good sign that the basic systems were still functioning. As they made their way toward the bridge, Sarah felt an increasing sense of unease. Everything was too neat, too orderly. A ship that had been abandoned in crisis should show signs of panic, of rushed evacuation. Instead, it looked almost as if the crew had simply vanished. Chief, Nastol called out softly, her translator barely above a whisper. I'm detecting active power signatures from the main computer core. It's been running this whole time. Sarah frowned behind her visor. Running what? Life support barely needs any processing power. Unknown, but the power consumption suggests complex calculations, massive data processing. They reached the bridge, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The command center was pristine, screens still glowing with active displays. And there, in the captain's chair, sat a single data crystal, technology that wouldn't be invented for another 20 years after this ship launched. Something's wrong, Sarah said, her combat instincts screaming. This isn't. A sudden surge of energy pulsed through the ship's systems. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut behind them as the main computer's displays flared to life, showing a symbol Sarah had hoped never to see again. The insignia of the Genesis Initiative, a radical human supremacy group that had nearly sparked a war with the Varaxians a decade ago. They hadn't found a lost colony ship. They'd found a trap. And they'd walked right into it. Sarah's mind raced as red warning lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow. The Genesis Initiative hadn't been heard from since their failed attempt to sabotage the Earth-Varaxian peace accords. Finding their symbol here, on a ship that should have been lost decades before they even existed, meant something far worse than a simple trap. Nastol, get that computer locked down, she ordered, already moving to cover the bridge's main entrance. Corell, Vextor, secure the other access points. Nobody touches anything until we know what we're dealing with. Chief, Nastol's voice carried an edge of concern that her translator couldn't quite smooth out. The computer, it's not just active. It's adapting. These systems are far more advanced than they should be. A sudden burst of static filled their comm channels, resolving into a voice that made Sarah's blood run cold. Welcome aboard, Starweaver crew. We've been waiting a very long time for visitors. Identify yourself, Sarah demanded, her grip tightening on her weapon. Oh, come now, Commander Chen. Or is it Chief now? Your career change made quite a stir in certain circles. The decorated Space Force officer who chose to serve on an alien vessel, you became something of a symbol. Sarah felt her team moving closer, forming a defensive perimeter without being asked. The seamless cooperation would have made her proud in any other situation. You seem to know a lot about me. Why don't we level the playing field? You can call me Dr. Nash, the voice replied. I'm what you might call a long-term investor in humanity's future, one that doesn't involve compromising our species' potential with alien influence. Nastol's scales flickered with indignation, but she kept working on the computer systems. Sarah had learned to read Varaxian expressions well enough to know her friend was angry but focused, exactly what they needed right now. The Genesis Initiative failed, Sarah said, buying time as she watched Nastol work. Your attempts to drive us apart only proved how much stronger we are together. Failed. Nash laughed. Commander, we didn't fail. We adapted. While you and your kind played at diplomacy, we prepared. This ship isn't just a relic. It's a testament to human ingenuity. We took the dreams of our past and forged them into weapons for our future. A series of clicks from Naztol's direction caught Sarah's attention. The first officer had managed to bypass something in the security protocols. On her display, Sarah could see that the ship's systems were far more extensive than they appeared. Layers of technology spanning decades, all carefully hidden behind the facade of an abandoned colony vessel. The distress signal, Sarah realized. How many other ships have you lured out here? Enough to learn from, to improve our methods. Though I must admit, catching a Varaxian vessel with a human security chief, that's a particularly valuable opportunity. The deck plating beneath them hummed as hidden systems came online. Sarah felt her magnetic boots struggling to maintain their grip. Artificial gravity was being manipulated, subtle and dangerous. Corell, she called out, status of those life support readings. The medical specialist's response was quick and precise. Multiple anomalies. Chief, the atmospheric composition is being altered through hidden vents. If we weren't in our suits, they're trying to gas us, Vextor growled, his scales darkening with anger. No, Sarah corrected, a cold realization settling over her. They're trying to gas the Starweaver. The atmospheric changes would be toxic to Varaxians, but harmless to humans. They're using us, using me, to get access to your ship. Nash's voice carried a note of approval. Very good, Commander. You always were sharp. The Starweaver's biotechnology is fascinating. Imagine what humanity could do with it, properly applied. No more depending on alien generosity. No more compromising our destiny. Chief, Naztol interrupted, her voice urgent. I found something. The computer core. It's not just controlling this ship. It's linked to others. This is a network node for something much bigger. Sarah's tactical training kicked into high gear. A network meant vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities meant options. Can you access the other nodes? Not directly, but Naztol's scales flickered with sudden inspiration. The Starweaver, our ship's systems are partially biological. They process data differently than conventional computers, which means they can't be hacked the same way. Sarah finished the thought. Nash, I'm curious. In all your research into my background, did you ever wonder why I chose the Starweaver specifically? There was a slight pause in Nash's response. The posting was arranged through standard diplomatic channels. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Wrong. I chose this ship because I specialized in bioelectronic warfare. The Starweaver isn't just a merchant vessel. She's a testbed for new defensive systems. Systems I helped design. And you just gave us access to your network. She nodded to Naztol, who pressed her crystalline hands against the computer interface. The Starweaver's living technology reached through the connection, spreading like a digital immune system through the Genesis Initiative's carefully constructed web of control. Impossible. Nash's voice cracked as his systems began to fail. Our firewalls can't stop something they don't understand. Sarah finished. That's the problem with supremacy, Doctor. You're so convinced of your own superiority that you never stop to learn from others. The hidden systems began to shut down as the Starweaver's influence spread through them. Emergency lights flickered and died, replaced by the normal illumination. But Sarah knew this couldn't be the end of it. They'd stumbled onto something far bigger than a single trapped ship, and the Genesis Initiative wouldn't give up their plans easily. Team, she said, secure the bridge. We need to download everything we can about their network. The real fight is just beginning. The data streamed across the Starweaver's main display in cascading waves of light, each pulse revealing more about the Genesis Initiative's network. Sarah stood with Captain Zexley in his private quarters, both of them studying the information their boarding team had recovered. The captain's scales had taken on a deep purple hue that Sarah had never seen before, something between worry and rage. 17 ships, Zexley said quietly. 17 vessels from different species, all lost in this sector over the past decade. We thought they were accidents, casualties of deep space. His four hands clenched simultaneously. They were being hunted. Sarah nodded grimly. The Genesis Initiative wasn't just collecting technology. They were studying alien biology, trying to find weaknesses. The Pioneers' dream was just one node in their network. She brought up another display, showing a complex web of hidden facilities and supply lines. They'd been building something out here, far from any monitoring stations. A weapon? Zexley asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Worse, they're creating a bioengineered virus, something that could target non-human physiologies while leaving humans unaffected. The atmospheric changes we detected were just a test run. Sarah's voice hardened. If they succeed, they could wipe out every non-human species in colonized space. The door chimed, and Naztul entered, her scales flickering with nervous energy. Captain, Chief, we've finished decrypting more of the files. You need to see this. The display changed, showing a series of classified Space Force documents. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she recognized the security clearance codes. These are real, she whispered. Current codes, high-level access. The initiative has infiltrators in the Space Force command structure. How deep does this go? Zexley demanded. Deep enough that we can't risk transmitting this information through normal channels, Sarah replied. If we alert the wrong person, the initiative could have time to activate their weapon, or worse, frame the Varaxians for any number of their past attacks. It would spark an interstellar war. Naztul's scales paled. The Trade Summit. Next week on Europa Station, representatives from every spacefaring species will be there to negotiate new hyperspace routes. A perfect target, Sarah confirmed. One attack could destroy diplomatic relations between humans and every other species. The initiative could paint it as a tragic accident, push for isolation policies. And humanity would never know they were being manipulated into turning against their allies. Zexley finished. But we have proof now. We can stop them. Not without risking the very war we're trying to prevent. Sarah began pacing, a habit from her military days. We need to handle this carefully. The initiative has spent years building their network, placing their people in positions of power. One wrong move. Then we work outside the system, Naztul suggested. The Starweaver isn't just a merchant vessel anymore. We're carrying proof of a conspiracy that threatens every species in known space. We have resources, contacts in the independent colonies, and a crew that represents exactly what the Genesis Initiative fears most. Sarah added, a plan beginning to form in her mind. Humans and aliens working together, combining our strengths. They never saw us as a threat because they couldn't imagine we'd truly trust each other. Captain Zexley's scales shifted to a deep blue of determination. What are you suggesting, Chief? We use their own network against them. The Starweaver's biotech gave us access to their systems. If we can plant evidence of their plans where it can't be hidden or denied, somewhere public. She paused, considering the risks. But it would mean disobeying direct orders. Once we start, we'll be branded as rogues by both sides until we can prove what's really happening. You're asking us to risk everything, Zexley said quietly. Our reputations, our futures, possibly our lives. I know it's not what any of you signed up for, Sarah acknowledged. I came aboard looking for peace, not another war. But if we don't stop them, we signed up to be part of something greater than ourselves. Naztul interrupted, her scales glowing with fierce loyalty. To prove that different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. What better way to prove that than by saving everyone? Zexley was quiet for a long moment, his scales shifting through various colors as he considered their options. Finally, they settled on the bright gold of decision. The Starweaver was named for an old Varaxian legend, he said, a being who wove the stars themselves into patterns of harmony. It seems fitting that we now find ourselves trying to weave together the futures of all our peoples. He straightened to his full height. "We'll need a plan." Sarah nodded, pulling up a map of known initiative facilities. "First, we need to gather allies we can trust. Other ships, other crews who've seen things that didn't add up. The initiative's strength is in their secrecy and their ability to pit us against each other. So we fight back with unity and truth." "And if we fail?" Nast, Tul asked softly. "Then we fail together," Sarah replied. "But I've seen what humans and aliens can accomplish when we work as one. And I believe that's stronger than any weapon the initiative can create." As they began to plan their next moves, Sarah felt a familiar tension in her shoulders. The weight of command, of lives depending on her decisions. But this time, she wasn't carrying it alone. Around her stood beings from another world who had become more than crew, more than friends. They had become family. The Genesis Initiative had spent years building their web of hatred and fear. Now it was time to show them what could be built with trust and hope instead. The Europa station hung against the backdrop of Jupiter like a jewel in the gas giant's crown, its diplomatic quarters already filled with representatives from 24 spacefaring species. The Starweaver approached slowly, just one of many merchant vessels arriving for the trade summit. But beneath its peaceful exterior, the ship hummed with tension and purpose. Sarah stood on the bridge, watching the stream of incoming ships through the viewport. In the week since discovering the Genesis Initiative's plan, they'd worked tirelessly to prepare their counterstrike. The Starweaver's cargo holds now concealed a network of quantum transmitters, each linked to evidence caches they'd planted throughout known space. "Status report," Captain Zexley commanded, his scales shimmering with controlled anxiety. "5 other ships have confirmed their positions," Naztol reported from her station. "The Morning Star, Helios Dawn, Crystalline Path, Windweaver, and Second Chance, all crews who've lost ships to the initiative's traps. All ready to broadcast on our signal." Sarah nodded. Finding allies hadn't been as difficult as they'd feared. Once they knew what to look for, patterns had emerged. Other crews had encountered the initiative's schemes, survived their traps, harbored their own suspicions. Together, they'd formed a coalition as diverse as space itself. "Security patrols are on standard patterns," Corell added from his post. "No sign they've detected our modifications to the station's communication array." "And Nash?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Still in the main conference room," Vextor confirmed, surrounded by his fellow diplomatic advisors. "All Genesis Initiative plants, according to the data we recovered." Sarah took a deep breath. Everything was in place, but the next few hours would determine whether they prevented a war or accidentally started one. "Remember," she said to the crew, "timing is everything. If we expose them too soon, before we can prove the connection to their network." "We know the risks, Chief," Naztol interrupted gently. "We all chose to be here." The ship's comm system chimed with an incoming message. "Merchant vessel Starweaver, you are cleared for docking at Bay 17. A station controller announced. "Please submit your cargo manifest for inspection." "Acknowledged control," Zexley responded smoothly. "Transmitting manifest now." They docked without incident, the station's massive arms guiding them into position. Sarah checked her uniform one last time. Not her old Space Force attire, but the flowing garments of a Varaxian merchant crew, modified to fit her human frame. It felt right, somehow. "First team, prepare to disembark," she ordered. "Remember your positions. We only get one chance at this." The next hour passed in a blur of calculated movements. Crew members spread throughout the station, each carrying pieces of equipment that seemed innocent enough alone, but would form a vital part of their plan. Sarah made her way to the main diplomatic center, Naztol at her side. "Quite a gathering," a familiar voice called out as they entered the grand hall. Dr. Nash stood near the center of the room, surrounded by other human officials. His smile was genuine, which somehow made it worse. "I don't believe we've met in person before, Chief Chen. Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Doctor," Sarah replied evenly. though I imagine we've heard very different stories. Indeed. His eyes flicked to Naztul, then back to Sarah. I must admit, I'm surprised to see you here. Merchant crews don't typically attend high-level diplomatic functions. Times change, Sarah said. Barriers break down. That's what progress looks like. Nash's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Progress. Such a loaded term. One person's progress is another's decay. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know what you found on the Pioneer's Dream, Commander. Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring our own systems? I counted on it, Sarah replied, just as her communicator vibrated once, the signal that everyone was in position. That's why we didn't try to hide our tracks. We wanted you to focus on us while others were looking elsewhere. Nash's expression froze as hidden screens throughout the diplomatic center flickered to life. Similar displays were activating across the station, throughout the gathered ships, and in diplomatic centers across known space. The Genesis Initiative's entire network displayed for all to see, every hidden facility, every trapped ship, every planted operative. What have you done? Nash hissed. Created a bridge, Sarah answered, raising her voice to address the stunned crowd. One that can't be broken by fear or hatred. Your people spent years hiding in shadows, spreading distrust. We just had to shine a light. Security forces were already moving in. But they weren't just human forces. Mixed teams of various species, all coordinating seamlessly. The future the initiative had feared most, brought to life before their eyes. You'll never prove any of this, Nash snarled, but his confidence was cracking. We have fail-safes, contingencies. Had, Naztul corrected, her scales glowing with fierce pride. Your network didn't just carry data, Doctor. It carried your orders, your philosophies, your beliefs in human supremacy. We didn't just find your weapon plans. We found your soul. And now everyone can see it. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. As Nash and his conspirators were led away, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Around the room, humans and aliens alike were talking, sharing information, working together to understand the scope of what had been uncovered. Captain Zexley approached, his scales shining with the bright gold of victory. The other ships report similar scenes across known space, he said. The initiative's network is exposed. Their infiltrators are being identified. It's over. Not over, Sarah corrected, watching representatives from different species already forming committees to investigate and prevent future threats. Just beginning. They wanted to keep us divided, afraid of our differences. Instead, they gave us a reason to prove how strong we are together. Later, standing on the Starweaver's observation deck, Sarah watched ships of all designs and origins moving against the starfield. Naztul joined her, offering a cup of Viraxian tea. What will you do now? The first officer asked. You could return to the Space Force. They'll want to make you a hero after this. Sarah smiled, sipping the tea that had once seemed so alien but now tasted like home. I already have a ship, she said, and a crew, and a family. Why would I want to be anywhere else? Above them, Jupiter's storms painted patterns across the sky, while below, beings from 100 worlds worked to forge something new together. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was, but it was real. And in the end, that was all any of them had ever wanted. A chance to prove that the space between the stars was big enough for everyone's dreams.